Ninjago season rankings are definitely a divisive topic. Everyone has their own favourite season, everyone has their own least favourite season, there is a lot of discussion around it. I personally think it is quite enjoyable, but at the same time, I can see how it can get quite heated. Because the thing is that there's always going to be an opinionated discussion when it does come to those seasons. There is no definitive answer by all accounts as to what is the best Ninjago installment, because it can vary. I can guarantee you that each Ninjago voice actor has a different favourite season, each writer, each content creator, each viewer, each everything towards Ninjago will have a different opinion. But is there a way to objectively quantify what is a common consensus on it? So that is what I wanted to set out and find, and in similar vein to two videos I have made recently, one where I talk about the highest rated episode of each season, and one where I talk about the worst rated episode of each season, which if you haven't seen, check it out. I went back to IMDb, took a look at every single ranking of every single Ninjago episode, and I procured an average of every single Ninjago season, and I have now ranked it based off of that. So in today's video, we are going to go through it. Take a look at a Ninjago season ranking in the most objective sense possible, because it curates thousands of reviews and it goes accordingly. So, before we get into it, please bear in mind, this is not my personal opinion. This is not my list that I agree with by any account, and it's certainly an interesting list at that. So please keep it in mind, and let's just be civil about it. But let me not waste any more of your time, and let's take a look at the most objective Ninjago ranking. So to start things off with 11th place, and you may be initially wondering why it is 11th, that is because some seasons do have the same average overall score. So for example, if two seasons have the exact same ranking and they both fall into 7th place, they will both have 7th place. But anyways, in 11th, we have Secrets of the Forbidden Spinjitzu, or Season 11. This season came in with an average overall rating of 7.1 out of 10, which for the lowest is still a very respectable score. That is still a very solid markup when it does come to a Ninjago season, especially one as divisive as this one. The thing I can most likely put this down to is the fact that it is the combination of both the Fire and the Ice chapter, which does have a lot of episodes that people just don't simply like all that much. The absolute worst, Kaiju Protocol do come to mind. So all of those episodes coming together to make one does naturally bring down that average. Also, it was the growing pains of the 11-minute era. So whilst I do think it makes sense, I'm still happy with the fact that it still got a decent score. So with a 7.1, we had things started off, and it's certainly going to get more interesting from here. Coming in at 10th place is going to be two entries, one of them being Prime Empire and the other one being Ninjago Crystallized. Now, Crystallized was most definitely to be expected, one that a lot of people would naturally associate with the least favourite Ninjago season, but personally, I still think it did alright. Coming in with a score of 7.7 for both of them, they both still did pretty well. Prime Empire being down here I know will upset a fair few people, but that's the score it ended up with. I do think Crystallized ultimately comes down to the decisions that it made. Prime Empire, I'm assuming it most likely just came down to a lackluster season in people's minds. There's nothing inherently wrong with the season, but I think people just didn't really have too much to say about it. So it does again make sense that both of these are down here, but I do think Prime Empire is where a lot of people would definitely disagree. But unfortunately, that is where it ended up. Please don't hate me. Taking up the 9th spot on its own is actually going to be Hands of Time. Hands of Time came in with just a slightly higher score of 7.8 out of 10, so only a 0.1 difference. This is certainly where a lot of the debate would come in. I think a lot of people would say that Prime Empire at minimum is above Hands of Time, but I do think the debate as to whether Crystallized or Hands of Time is below one or the other is one thing that a lot of people would discuss. Me personally, I'm okay with that ranking, and that's just because of my own personal biases, but again, I don't think on an overall scale, this list is definitely out of proportion, but I do think number 9 for Hands of Time is still good, and 7.8 does feel right, because whilst there are some lackluster episodes and there are a lot of problems with Hands of Time, there is still a lot of really good stuff there in my opinion. spoiler alert, there's a Hands of Time video coming soon. But I do think, again, 7.8 is really better than I was expecting, and I will actually take that and run. But, honestly, I do still think it's a decent spot nonetheless. Next up is going to be the number 8 slot, which is going to be going to 3 different seasons. One of them being Seabound, the next one being Legacy of the Green Ninja, and the last one being Rise of the Serpentine. I do think all of these coming together, again, kind of makes sense. They are honestly still a little lower than I was expecting, but that is just me. They all came in with an average of 7.9 out of 10. The reason why I personally believe that this is the case is because Seabound does have some filler in the middle, and so does both Season 1 and Season 2. Season 2 obviously being one of the more recognizable cases of filler, but again, that is just me. I don't think that is bad by any account, and recently I did actually release a video talking about Ninjago filler, so if you didn't see that, I would recommend you do so. But I do think all of these having a fairly respectable score is pretty good to see. I don't think they're only 0.1 above Hands of Time, but again, that is my own opinion. But that is not this list. But I do still think they got at least a little decent a bit of recognition, but I do think at minimum Season 1 and Season 2 should have been higher, but yeah. But right, number 8. Fair play everyone. We now get into the number 7 slot, and there are 2 entries here, both of which I adamantly disagree with. One because I think it should be lower, the other one I think should be much higher. The 2 we've got is Dragon's Rising Season 1 and Master of the Mountain. Both of them coming in with an overall score of 8.0. No other decimal places to be considered. But both of them I do think kind of earn where they're at, but I do personally think Master of the Mountain should be higher, and Season 1 should be lower. This mainly comes down to the fact that I think Season 1 of Dragon's Rising was brought down by Part 2, but that's another video for another day. But I do understand why people like it as much as they do, and I definitely do think that number is being held up by Part 1, but that's beside the point. Master of the Mountain, I do think should have been higher here. I think it's just a consistently fantastic season, but again, not my list, so I do understand why both of them are where they are. Taking this more middle-esque type ground, I do think kind of works, so I'm gonna be happy with it on an overall scale. But both of these I do think were the biggest anomaly for me personally. However, I think the number 6 slot is definitely going to be the anomaly for most of Ninjago fans, because that number 6 slot is actually going to be going to 2 seasons being rebooted and Skybound. 2 of these seasons are by far the most divisive seasons in all of Ninjago's history, and it makes sense that they are in the number 6 slot because this puts them in the middle, which works because both Rebooted and Skybound both have people who absolutely love the season and absolutely hate the season. I understand why in both regards. Rebooted definitely did have some weird decisions made. I know a lot of people aren't a big fan of the pacing, aren't a fan of the creative decisions they made, which is fair enough. And Skybound, people don't like the fact that the season on an overall scale just didn't really matter. People don't like Nardakan, which is very valid, but it does seem to be that the most divisive seasons ended up in the middle genuinely does work, because those are the 2 seasons where they will either be at the bottom of someone's list or at the very top. So I do think this is possibly the most fitting one of the bunch. Personally for me, I don't really have too much of an opinion on either. I do think Rebooted could be higher personally, and Skybound in comparison to the other seasons that are on there could be lower down, but again, not my list. You can definitely count out how many times I read this. But yeah, honestly, number 6, fair play to the both of them. We are now into the top 5, and the number 5 slot is only actually belonging to one season, and this is Dragon's Rising Season 2. Season 2 came in with an overall score of 8.5 out of 10, which is a really good score and a big jump up in comparison to the previous seasons. But the thing is that I know for a fact that this is definitely one that a lot of people would disagree with. This is a lot of people's favourite Ninjago Dragon's Rising season, and that does make sense. It's a fantastic season, and it does have a really high score to reflect that. But I do think it suffered because there are people who aren't a big fan of Season 2 Part 2. Personally speaking, I love Part 2. I prefer it over part 1, but I know I don't have that sentiment or I don't share it with a vast majority. But I do think this is one that a lot of people would disagree with, especially if you consider the other 2 Dragon's Rising seasons that we haven't talked about yet. Obviously, one of them people would agree with, the other one people most definitely wouldn't, but that's for in a minute. But I will say, part 2 and part 1 of season 2 are absolutely fantastic. I do like the Blood Moon stuff, and I do think it's a fairly solid season, but I do personally prefer the Tournament of Sources stuff, and that is why I think the season does belong here, because they are 2 very solid entries. But personally for me, it's not my favourite Dragon's Rising season. So, fair enough to me, but I do think this is definitely one that a lot of people would disagree with. But that was the number 5 slot. Let's get into number 4. Because the number 4 slot ironically does have 4 entries to have. One of them being Tournament of Elements, another one being Possession, the third one being March of the Oni, and the 4th one being Dragon's Rising Season 3. Now, immediately, I know this is one that people are going to disagree with, but on the overall average on IMDb, all of them score 8.6 out of 10. Now, I do like Season 3 more than most. I do have my enjoyments from it. I think Part 1 in particular is quite solid, despite some of the things that are in there. But I don't think it's on the means of the other 3. The other 3 are absolutely fantastic seasons that I have literally no problem with. But this one actually sharing that score, I don't really see it. The thing that I'm attributing this to are the very solid finales and some other very solid episodes in the mix of it. I do think it's been very generously given its score here, but it's not my list. I'm just really waiting for people to disagree with this one. This is definitely a divisive pick, and one that people would definitely not put above Season 2 of Dragon's Rising, me included, and I do think it feels like it is the wrong way around, but I promise you, as of the time of filming this video, this is where the season does lie. Of course, with all of these seasons, it could be different by the time it's uploaded, but as it stands, Season 3 is up there in number 4 with the likes of Possession, Tournament of Elements, and March of the Oni. But let's quell the fire. Let's get into the top 3, and all of the top 3 are sharing their own unique number. The number 3 spot, or the bronze medal, is going to be going to Hunted. Hunted achieved a very, very respectable score, being a very solid 8.7 out of 10. This is really good when it does come to Ninjago rankings, and I definitely do think this is deserving considering that on an overall per episode basis, Hunted does have the highest rated episode, being Green Destiny at a 9.7. The thing is that is definitely bringing it up to the point where it's at. I think if the finale was just another average episode, this would have fallen down quite significantly, but luckily it didn't. Hunted is definitely needing of the top 3 in my opinion. It's a fantastic season with amazing themes, with amazing visuals, with animation, with story, the whole 9 yards. So I'm very happy that this one does get the credit it deserves, because I do personally feel like Hunted gets a little bit of the short stick within the Oni trilogy, but again, that is just me, so I am glad that this one is here. I love Hunted. I love basically everything about Hunted. I don't have an issue with this whatsoever. Taking the silver medal is going to be Sons of Garmadon. This is one that I am very much expecting, again, disagreement, because in a lot of people's eyes, this is the best season, and it's done very well. It has come in with an overall score of 8.8 out of 10, which is a very nice score for the season. It is consistently rated high, has some really good high notes in the season, but it doesn't have a standout episode on a ranking basis like Green Destiny. Green Destiny has all of the episodes in a similar ranking apart from that one. That one is just excelling in its own unique way. If Sons of Garmadon had that, I think we'd be looking at a very different list, but unfortunately it doesn't. But this season is rated very solid throughout, has a really good everything. It takes everything that's good about Hunted and just does it better, but it does just pale in comparison on the objective sense when it does come to the number 1 slot. But Sons of Garmadon should not be anywhere near upset with the score that it did get. It only lost by 0.1, and the season that it lost out to is definitely one that a lot of people have come to love. So, congratulations Sons of Garmadon, but let's get into the number 1 spot. And that is going to be Dragon's Rising Season 4. Now, as of the time of filming, this is based off of the Part 1 metrics. I'm not basing it off of Part 2. It just leaked. I'm still upset. But anyways, Part 1 of Dragon's Rising Season 4 obtained an overall ranking of 8.9 out of 10. Now, this is definitely very high and may even come down to recency bias, but a lot of people absolutely love this Ninjago season. People love everything about Lloyd, love all of the ninja, Jay getting his memories back. Everything about it is something that people do really enjoy. So I do think this does make sense. Is it better than Sons of Garmadon? No. But yeah, on an overall, in the most average sense possible, it does just beat it out. I think it's honestly a good thing that Dragon's Rising Season 4 is up there. It goes to show that Ninjago is still consistently posting good seasons. It would be a shame if this entire video was just me demonstrating that the first few seasons was the peak and we have been dwindling ever since. It's nice that there is a good competition between all of these seasons, so I'm honestly glad that this is the case. How will Part 2 affect these rankings? Who truly knows? I'm not here to discuss that today. I really am not willing to talk about leaks. But all I know is that this is the current winner. This very well may change. Maybe Sons of Garmadon will go back to number 1. Who truly knows? But as it stands, the most objectively highest rated and most popular season of Ninjago is the newest one. Congratulations. Now, I will say before I go any further, there are 2 things here that are technically missing but also not. You may be wondering why I have not included the island or Dare the Departed. That is because they are very difficult to incorporate here, and I mainly was just going off of seasons, whereas those are basically specials. Also, the island IMDb rankings are incorporated into Seabound, so keep that in mind. But I do think regardless of that, we are looking at a very interesting list here, and it does show what Ninjago fans do and don't like. I will also say, of course, this is not my personal ranking like I've kept saying. My list honestly looks fairly different to this list, and that is completely fine. But I would love to know, would you like my personal season ranking? Is that a video I should finally get around to? I've kind of been putting it off, to be perfectly honest with you. But if you guys do want it, I would be more than happy to do it, because I would like to share those opinions. But as of now, that was the most objective ranking. But thank you very much for watching the video, and I do hope you enjoyed, and if you did, please consider subscribing. I love discussing Ninjago with more people. And if you do want to support the channel any further, which you do not have to, you could always become a channel member and join the legends that you see on screen. Each of your support means the absolute world to me. I truly cannot thank you enough for everything that you guys do. But like I said, that's about it for today, and take care. Okay,